SA today. Now, close to 600 foreign nationals have been arrested in the city of Johannesburg. This after a raid by law enforcement this past week, and that saw hundreds of millions of rands worth of counterfeit goods seized in the process. Police shut down the area, seizing pirated goods from stores and buildings. Concerns, however, have been raised that raids carry a xenophobic sentiment. The arrested foreigners remain in custody at the Johannesburg Central police station until they can be processed by Home Affairs. To take us through this a bit more, I'm now joined in studio by the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr Aaron Motsoaledi. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you to the viewers out there.
All right, so let's start with the raids themselves. It wasn't about foreign nationals, it was about counterfeit goods. And what did you find in the process that found us in this situation?
Well, Peter, it was about crime. And I'll start by pleading South Africans to understand that crime is crime is crime. Don't label the person who is committing that crime, but make sure that when the person commits the crime, the laws of the country must apply. We've got laws in this country. We can't become a lawless country, which is what I feel people are trying to push, that if it is a foreign national, please be careful. If it's South African, please do this and that. No, it can't be. We must be all equal before the law. Once you commit a crime, the law must take its course.
All right. Was there a suspicion, though, that there could be undocumented migrants in these buildings and also perhaps involved in this criminal activity?
I don't know about the suspicion, but when the people were arrested, to be exact, 659 people were arrested and taken to Johannesburg Central prison. You know, the one we used to call, the notorious one we used to call John Foster Square, but it's now Johannesburg Central prison. They were taken there and processed. 42 Home Affairs officials were called in to help police process fingerprints, documentation, etc.
So they were only called in at that point?
Well, no. Yeah. Even in the raiding. Yeah. Remember, this raid is said that was done by police. It's actually a joint effort by law enforcement agencies. Home Affairs is part of the law enforcement agency.
So why would Home Affairs have been involved in the raids if it's criminality?
Well, look, criminality can involve customs, can involve having no documentation. It involves all sorts of things. It involves lack of identification. Remember, Home Affairs is the department that identifies people. So we are part and parcel of the JCPS cluster, by the way. JCPS cluster is police, is Home Affairs, is intelligence, is the army, is the Department of Justice. So whenever they say they are calling a joint operation, they can't leave Home Affairs. Whether it's an ordinary crime operation or not, Home Affairs must always be there.
Right.
So in this case, out of the 659 people who were there, after processing them, they are busy processing them. They are not waiting for Home Affairs. There are 42 Home Affairs officials there right now processing, and we already know what's happening.
Right.
Yeah, because 487 were found to be migrants who have got no documentation altogether. 117 were found with some of documentation or the other, and were actually released because they were not arrested for documentation. They were arrested for crime, for the criminal activity which they found there.
So they still need to deal with the criminal element.
They still need to deal with the criminal part of it, but they found that in as far as documentation is concerned, 117 were having 45. Home Affairs officials cannot vouch for the document that were presented to them. In other words, they can't vouch for their authenticity. So they were called to come in on Monday at the Department of Home Affairs for them to authenticate the documents.
All right. So what happens to these undocumented people now?
Well, in terms of the Refugees Act, they must appear in court within 48 hours. And the court will decide. Because Home Affairs is going to say they are undocumented, we need to deport them. But nobody gets deported from South Africa in that manner unless they've appeared before a judicial officer. And a judicial officer will be a judge or a magistrate who will then confirm. And then once they confirm, it means they must go to Lindela because that's the only deportation center we've got in the country. From there, processes start of deportation. And what do I mean by processes? People don't just get deported. You have got to discuss with the embassies from those particular countries. They must negotiate because some countries You can arrive there with people and they just refuse.
Right.
And say, we no longer want this person in our country. Even we say, no, this is your national. They said, no, the person has left illegally. We no longer accept them. Actually, it happened once. So Home Affairs cannot just deport, because it happened once when they've actually hired a chartered plane to deport 100 people. When they arrive in what we regarded as their country of origin, the country said, no,
we
not
don't know
here.
these people.
Now, where do you take them? Because they are nationals there, and they tell you, I'm from here, and the country says no. And we have to transport them back again and go to Lindela. You can see how expensive that exercise is.
So if 400 people were found to be undocumented, more than 400, in just a couple of raids in one small area, what does this say about how big the issue is in terms of the number of undocumented migrants in the country?
Oh, it's big. It's big. That's very obvious. It's big, because I have to accept up front that we do have porous borders, and we need to solve that. So the problem of undocumentation is big. In the past 5 years, Home Affairs spent close to R1 billion in deportation, just taking people back home. But they come back immediately. When they arrive there, I understand I was given information that some even returned the very same day, immediately after being delivered, So it is a big problem. Yeah. You're correct.
Whenever you have a situation like this, corrupt activities start to become a thing. So it could be Home Affairs officials saying, okay, you don't have your documents, but pay me something and I'll let you go. It could be police turning a blind eye. I mean, we saw 7 police officers who tried to sell the very things that they'd confiscated. Are you concerned about that? Is that something that you're cognizant of?
Oh, yes, we are cognizant. In fact, that's true. I was jokingly saying I've gone through many departments in government, starting from Limpopo when I was an MEC. Home Affairs is the only department where I found a special branch, a Deputy Director General for corruption.
Right.
That's a branch in Home Affairs. The other department has got a Deputy Director General for this, Deputy Director General. It's about operations. But Home Affairs have got one just for corruption. And that corruption is not for members of the public only. It's actually targeted at officials of Home Affairs. And we change our systems every day for that corruption not to change, to take place. For instance, you can even get a false document through corruption. You know that, right? But it used to happen in the past. But now we are using what they call BACAM, biometric access control system, whereby every Home Affairs official have to put their fingerprint. Okay. So otherwise, in order to get into a computer. And if anything happens, we'll know which Home Affairs official did it. At the moment, they just say, it's not me, and you start an investigation and you lose. We even gave them a password, and guess what happened? That you enter this system through a password, and if anything happens, we trace the password. But on the day something like that has happened, the person brings a medical certificate from a doctor. Say, on the day on which the password was used, I wasn't there, so it's not me. So that's why we moved to biometrics. Because an official must tell us if somebody can steal their finger and go and open that machine. And
will there be more raids? And quite likely you're going to find more undocumented migrants and continue to fill up Lindela?
Oh, yes. They will. There must be more raids, and I'm quite sure that in most of these raids they will be found, because we do know we have got this problem of undocumented migrants.
So what's the long-term solution? We can't keep on like
deporting. Oh yes. It's like pouring water in a leaking container. That's true. The long-term solution is that the government decided 13 years ago to put up a border management authority, a special authority that deals with borders, because that's where the problem is. Remember, during apartheid, we put the whole army around the borders. There were even electric fences. You can no longer do so under international convention, AU. We are now integrated into AU and SADC. We have got to follow the protocols and the rules there. So you can no longer follow that method. So the method that the state is going to follow is the Border Management Authority, because, Peter, at the moment, there are 7 entities of state, government departments and entities that are operating at the borders. And between them, they must apply 58 acts of parliament. I'm sure even that in itself can confuse. And they've got different commanders, you know. So under the Border Management Authority, you have got one command structure and one act, which is the Border Management Authority Act. Unfortunately, that act has been passed in the National Assembly 2 years back. And for the past 2 years, it has been stuck in the NCOP. I'm finding a way to find out exactly why it is stuck there, unstuck it and put up the authority.
We've run out of time, but very quickly. So why don't we then do what the EFF has asked and just get rid of the borders? If I hear a Pedi speaking, it sounds like a Shona. And so these borders were colonial borders, not natural borders of the people of Africa. Why don't we just get rid of them?
Well, if you are not in government, you'll say so anytime. But for those who are governing, they can't. As some say in their protocols, there's what we call SADC organ on politics and security. That includes immigration. It consists of 6 ministers from each SADC country. Coincidentally, 3 weeks ago, that SADC organ has said the AU issue of what we do with borders, common visas, etc., is there on the program, but there are conditions. For instance, one of the main conditions, which it looks like is difficult for many African countries to meet, is that before you do anything like that, every person must be documented, even in their own country. And I'm sure you are aware on the African continent, the issue of documentation even in own country is not there. In fact, look, it's not an over-exaggeration to say we still have countries on the continent where a person is born, get married and die, and it's not recorded anywhere whatsoever in any government documents. I learned this not from Home Affairs, but from a conference 2 weeks after I came into the department called ID for Africa, which includes United Nations and other international organizations. The CEO of that organization is from Brazil. He was reading these figures and saying in some countries on this continent, they've got 5% registration rate. In other words, 5%. Documentation rate. Yes. South Africa is at 85%, but there are countries which are still at 5%. Okay. So before you say we do common things and all that, you need to know who is where and how many, who is documented where. No, even in our country, advanced as we are, it's not uncommon to find somebody at the age of 13 coming into Home Affairs and saying, I want a birth certificate. Wow. And you say, who are you? I'm Aaron Motsoaledi. Where were you born? This, And now Home Affairs officials can't just give. They've got to go back and investigate, and sometimes there's no information. But we do have, at the moment, as I'm speaking, there are 45,000 South Africans who are aged above 13 years who don't have a birth certificate and they want it now. And we are not refusing to give. But before giving, we have got to verify who is this person.
Okay, so who's coming at this tasks on your desk, it looks like. But we're going to have to leave it there. I think we're going to have a number of conversations together. Thanks so much indeed for coming this day, though.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister.
Thanks.
Palesa?
Peter, thank you so much. As we said, it's a holiday today. We're celebrating Women's Day. You still are taking it very easy at home. Let's take you back downstairs to Radio Park in Auckland Park, where our sister radio station, FM